In bringing this charming and beautiful 16-bit game to the modern era, Square Enix has done a fantastic job transitioning from 2D to 3D, wonderfully recreating the feel of the original. However, this faithfulness is a bit of a double-edged sword because Trials of Mana throws just about every mid-1990s JRPG trope at you, making its locations and stories feel out of date in spite of the modern graphical overhaul. Trials of Mana, known as Seiken Densetsu 3 in Japan, came out in 1995, but the original never saw a Western release until last year's Collection of Mana. I'm of the belief that this is the most beautiful 16-bit game ever made, and the remake does a wonderful job capturing most of that beauty. Trials of Mana has a gorgeous, colorful art style with hyper-saturated colors giving everything a deep, dreamlike hue. On Switch, Trials of Mana looks lovely. On PS4 Pro, it's even better, and you'll avoid the Switch's frame drops if you play it there. Even docked, the Switch looks like it's struggling to hit 30 frames, and in some cutscenes, the frame rate just looks awful. Musically, the new incarnation of Trials of Mana's modern arrangements of the original chiptune soundtrack sound phenomenal. One feature I really like is the ability to swap between the remake and the original 16-bit soundtrack at any time. Both are just so good. These days, a remake can mean anything from a borderline remaster to a complete reimagining, and Trials of Mana is on the extremely loyal side of that spectrum. The ring menus of the original are here, used much in the same way. Combat too feels incredibly similar, and I mean that as a compliment because I've always liked the Mana series' unique action RPG combat. I love the balance between the real-time combat of action games with the party management of an RPG, both of which happen in real time, although the management side mercifully stops the action so you can cycle through the rings to find the command you want to give. It takes some getting used to, that's for sure, but when Trials combat clicked for me, all the disparate parts and pieces make perfect sense. There's a chaotic rhythm to it, but it never feels unmanageable. My main complaint about the 2020 version is the camera. It doesn't follow you in battles, you have to move it on your own. There's already enough to think about with combos and charge attacks, I don't need another thing to keep track of. The real fun in combat comes from Trial of Mana's many boss battles. Maintaining your party through some of the tougher fights means thinking ahead, exploiting elemental weaknesses, and keeping everyone from dying through liberal use of magic and items. The AI for your party members does a great job keeping them doing what you actually want them to do, so you don't have to scream at the game because your healer is running headfirst into a melee attack while the rest of your party is on death's door. You're also free to swap characters at any time, so you can take advantage of one of their special abilities or magic spells. The ability to change characters mid-battle gives you even more flexibility. On normal settings, difficulty felt a little on the easy side, but there's a harder setting too. The loyalty to the original's story and locations means there's a lot of empty, cliché NPC dialogue to sort through. That seems like the kind of thing a remake should leave on the cutting room floor. At the same time, there aren't any side quests, or really any compelling reasons to talk to NPCs at all. I don't want to be sent to clear the sewers of rats or anything, but I could have used some local color. That's not to say Trials of Mana is lacking in content. It's not. You pick from one of 6 characters at the start, as well as a secondary and third character for your party. It took me just around 20 hours to make it through Duran's story with Angela and Charlotte as the other members of my party. But each character has their own story, and you cross paths with each of the other characters at least once in the course of a playthrough. There are also class changes to unlock, with battle techniques and abilities varying depending on which ones you pick. Each class change has 2 options, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, but ultimately I just choose the ones that look the coolest. There's also new post-game content, and without spoiling anything, I'm definitely enjoying myself. It's more substantial than I imagined it would be, both from a content perspective and from the way it adds to the existing story. Trials of Mana is absolutely charming and does an excellent job keeping what works from the original while upgrading its aesthetics to the modern era. The combat system works well in its new 3D trappings, with a steep but satisfying learning curve. The transition to modern tech has introduced some camera problems though, and I wish Square Enix had taken this opportunity to flesh out the world with interesting side quests and trim out some of the more tedious dialogue. Even so, exploring, battling, and waging war with bosses all remain really fun, and its JRPG tropes come off as charming throwbacks rather than eye-rolling cliches. For more reviews of classics remade, check out our Final Fantasy VII Remake or Resident Evil 3 reviews. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Thanks for everything!